Dallas-Fort Worth. Known for the Dallas Cowboys, traffic that makes I-285 in Atlanta seem like heaven, and a subway on the interstate. In the weather community, it's known for being the #1 subject of the big what-if scenario. It's the largest city in traditional Tornado Alley, and many have asked about the nightmare scenario, a violent tornado tearing through downtown Dallas, usually after dark. Residents know about the potential nightmare scenario, but the area has generally been very lucky. Come Christmas 2015, many were either out of town or enjoying the festivities. The weather was quite a bit warmer than usual, and there was a chance of storms the next day. Many went on with their lives as normal. As it turns out, nobody knew how close the nightmare scenario of a violent tornado tearing through downtown Dallas at night came the night after Christmas. On December 26, 2015, supercell thunderstorms formed across north-central Texas and Oklahoma, producing 13 tornadoes in those states. Of those, 2 supercells in particular made their thunderous roars well known across the DFW metro. The first supercell produced an EF3 twister that moved through Red Oak, Ovilla, and Glen Heights, with the second supercell producing an EF4 tornado that tore through portions of Garland and Rowlett, the first violent tornado to hit Dallas County since 1926. The tornadoes themselves made their legacy known with the heavy damage they inflicted on the numerous neighborhoods in the metro. This year marks 10 years since the event, and I believe the time is right to cover it. Today, I will be covering the North Central Texas tornado outbreak of December 26, 2015. I'll be taking a deep dive into the synopsis, the events as they happened, the aftermath and recovery, and how the impacted areas are doing today. Welcome to Nature's Fury. A few days prior to the event, in the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere, a high-amplitude trough moved to the east-southeast over the southwestern United States. As the 26th got closer, the southern extent of the trough started to transition into a cutoff low, showing signs of developing into an inland cyclone. Off of the southern Atlantic coast of the United States, a strong upper-level ridge was in full force, bringing unusually warm temperatures to the deep south. The combination of the developing inland cyclone and the ridge provided strong southerly winds that transported warm, moist air from the Gulf northward into the southern plains. Closer to the surface, a strong polar front located over western Texas slowly drifted to the east-southeast, with a developing warm front spanning from central Oklahoma to the east, with southerly winds bringing temperatures into the low and mid-70s, and dews into the 60s and low 70s. The expectations for the event was as follows. Throughout the morning, low to mid-level southerly flow would continue to strengthen throughout the day, with 850 millibar flow increasing to and above 50 knots. While the strongest forcing for ascent would remain west of the Arctic front, weak height falls in association with the amplification and eastward movement of the trough would overspread the boundary and warm sector. Shallow convection within the warm sector would gradually intensify, eventually leading to scattered surface or near-surface-based thunderstorms from central and northeastern Texas into portions of Arkansas and Oklahoma as early as midday. The combination of moderate to high shear, high moisture quality, amongst other factors, would provide the potential for tornadic thunderstorms in the region, lasting until the early part of the night. Soon the storms would evolve into broken lines or loops, promoting a threat of strong winds. But what did the environment actually end up looking like? Starting with the shear, generally wind shear profiles were as good as it could get. 50 to 60 knots of southerly south-southwesterly flow at the 500 millibar level, 45 to 55 knots of southerly flow at the 700 millibar level, and 45 to 55 knots of southerly flow at the 850 millibar level. Effective bulk shear ranged from 50 to 55 knots, and effective storm relative helicity values ranged from 200 to 400 meters squared per second squared. So shear was high. What about the instability? Really good for the time of year. Generally speaking, surface-based CAPE ranged from 1,000 to 2,000 joules per kilogram in north-central Texas, with mixed-layer CAPE ranging from 1,000 to 1,500 joules per kilogram. 3-kilometer CAPE was between 75 to 100 joules per kilogram. While low-level lapse rates were relatively low, decent mid-level lapse rates and storm interactions made up for it. Keep in mind I said generally speaking for that whole region because there were two big elephants in the room. the 18Z and 0Z soundings for Dallas-Fort Worth. By 18Z, the cap is pretty much gone in its entirety, given how the warm nodes between the 700 and 500 millibar level in the sounding is gone, and instability was high, nearly 3,000 joules per kilogram of surface CAPE and roughly 1,700 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE. A similar story is obvious at the 0Z sounding. Given this doesn't show up on the SPC contours at all, there's two conclusions that could be made here. One, the environment in these soundings were heavily localized, or two, the RAP didn't handle these soundings too well when putting it on the SPC mesoscale archive. There was moderate to high instability in the region, so the main issues going into this event was a warm nose between the 700 and 500 millibar levels early on, and the uncertainty in the storm mode. For chasers such as Ben Holcomb, given he tore his ACL and was unable to return to Michigan for Christmas festivities, decided to chase the event.
You know, it did look like a number of days out. We kind of were in an active period. I don't know if you've looked into like that whole week much.
Yeah, it was
Or
Saturday.
it was like it wasn't Hattiesburg the 23rd, but there was
Holly Springs.
Holly Springs, that's what it was. I was sitting here like trying to rack my brain. Well, anyways, so I've got a knee brace on. I've been going to physical therapy, not going for Christmas, which I was okay with, but I'm sitting at home the 23rd and watching this crap on being streamed, and I'm sure it was Scott Peaks or somebody's stream, but it was this incredible tornado. Like, well, holy crap, and that has a tendency to get you excited. So, it's like, well, it looks. I don't remember what the outlook was like 2 days out. I think the day 3 had a slight risk,
Yeah,
but I could be wrong. It did. Okay. Yeah, I remember thinking like, well, it looks like there's going to be supercells. Again, I think we were kind of like in a long wave pattern. It has been 10 years, obviously, but
right.
I think we were kind of like in a longer wave pattern. With these waves coming through. The one for the 23rd, and then obviously the 26th. And I remember with a lot of chasers, there was a what do I want to call it? Not really like a competition, but there was a fair number of chasers that actually went to Amarillo to cover the snow, because it was, if I remember correctly, quite the significant winter storm.
Right.
And at that point, I had a girlfriend that lived with me, but she was at her parents' house, and that was, we broke up right after that, anyways. But so she wasn't with me. I was just chilling at home by myself. So I was like, well, yeah, I'm gonna go storm chasing. So, it was just one of those days, like 3-hour drive to DFW and back at worst.
The potential for severe weather was recognized early on, with a day 4 15% risk for severe weather posted from south central Texas northeastward into southeastern Oklahoma. For both the day 3 and day 2 outlooks, a slight risk was put in place. The slight risk remained on the first day 1 outlook, but at the 13Z outlook, an enhanced risk was put in place from central Texas northward through southeastern Oklahoma, with a 10% tornado risk, 15% hail risk, and 15% wind risk. The enhanced risk was expanded to the west at 20Z for a 30% wind risk. Even with the forecast in place, nobody could have envisioned what the setup for the 26th had in store for the world. Across north-central Texas, residents in the region woke up and went outside to the unusual feeling of the warm and muggy weather in place for the day. Come midday, showers and storms developed amongst a confluence band between I-35 and I-45. At 12:45 p.m., the SPC issued a tornado watch for portions of north-central Texas, southeastern Oklahoma, and western Arkansas, with moderate chances of a tornado, severe wind, and severe hail, but a low chance for significant tornadoes. By 1:30 p.m., storms started showing signs of rotation, and the ones that crossed I-45 specifically had pretty significant couplets. However, they weren't able to produce anything on the ground. Ben Holcomb saw one of these storms himself.
So I went down into Fort Worth for some reason. I think I still thought I was going to end up further west. I'm a little bit cloudy on that because I really don't remember at this point. But I do remember getting down to 820 in North Fort Worth, and I don't believe that they had the express lanes in there at that point, but if they did, I took them. But I know I used 820 to get around really quick down to 20, and then get into the position for that Kaufman storm. And so when I got down to the Kaufman storm, I actually have some video here. I could show you. I never put it online because it's it's a nobody really cares unless you're doing something like this,
Right.
But it's there was a weak inflow tail kind of visible to it. There might have actually been two inflow tails. I can't tell if it's just the cloud deck or if it's like the actual uh, inflow tail going into like a mid-level part of the storm. But the updrafts were kind of skinny, and I think that that's why they never really made it to the ground. That would be my guess. Um, and so the first storm there near Kaufman, south of Kaufman or whatever, I got way too close under the storm. Um, I was listening that it said something like I think the warning text had it moving northeast at 50 miles an hour, 50. So it kind of sped away from me, and I think it petered out when it got up by the warm front. Um, so I went east because there was, as you said, there's a bunch of little. Honestly, they're just little rain showers, is what they look like on radar, if I
Right.
remember correctly. And they were all pretty intensely spinning. And you can see the spinning in person. I remember being able to, it's one of those storms where you could actually see the visible spin on it. Um, and part of that was just the motion of it coming at you and then flying by. Like everything was just screaming that day. And I followed a couple of those storms like this. But so I was in Canton on another cell just like that later, and I think that's the one I did end up following that one all the way up to like Sulphur Springs, and keeping up with it was really tough. And so I'm pretty sure I originally tweeted a picture of that updraft to the National Weather Service in Shreveport at some point, because I had made it into their CWA, which I think Sulphur Springs is in it. I'd have to look, and it may have changed since back then, but I remember just thinking like, well, crap, I'm in Shreveport CWA. I kind of screwed up today. So I end up back in Sulphur Springs at some point. It would have probably been, I don't know, 5:30. Oh, here I can tell you exactly when. Actually, so 2342Z. So that would have been 5:42 basically is when I got on I-30 there in Sulphur Springs. And so my goal, I was kind of looking at to just go home. So my idea was that I was going to go west to Greenville and then just kind of take 380 across, which was a little bit less of a nightmare 10 years ago. That would take hours nowadays. But 380 was a little bit more out.
Right.
Not in the middle of everything back then.
Between 2:15 and 2:45 p.m., the first supercell of interest, or supercell A, forms within the confluence band, beginning to develop and mature between 4:30 and 5 p.m. as it passed to the west of Waco, Texas. Also during this time, two showers that would soon develop to become supercells fired in the confluence band at around 3:30, supercells B and C, and they soon began to develop and mature. Come near 6 p.m., supercell A is approaching the Dallas metro. Not too long after a separate supercell prompted a tornado warning for the city directly. Thanks in part to the two supercells that had formed to its east, alongside one of the cells splitting, the first major tornado of the event would soon touch down between Waxahachie and Midlothian. At 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, a twister touched down on Longhorn Road right next to Midway Regional Airport, between the towns of Waxahachie and Midlothian, moving to the north-northeast, causing minimal damage as it tore roofings off of some homes before it crossed into the Long Branch Estates neighborhood, where mobile homes off of Daniel Road were hit, including one that was flipped over. At 6:02 p.m., the twister crossed over Black Champ Road and entered the Bob White Estates neighborhood, rapidly intensifying to an EF3 equivalent tornado with estimated winds of 150 miles per hour as it struck homes along Walker Court South and Faith Lane before weakening a bit as it crossed over Clayton Drive and into the Legacy Estates neighborhood. The tornado strengthened again, crossing over Megan Lane, tearing roofs off of homes with winds of 125 miles per hour. Then, as it crossed over Megan Lane for the second time and into the Glen Eagles area, it significantly damaged homes off of Glenlock Drive, Edda Court, and Rex Court, producing EF3 damage once more after it crossed Billingsley Drive, with peak winds of 160 miles per hour in this region at 6:05 p.m. before going into a mostly rural area. At around this time, NWS Dallas-Fort Worth were getting more and more concerned at the evolving situation. They had been warning the South since about 4:30 p.m., but the situation kept looking more and more dire by the second. This supercell showed little signs of stopping and was aiming straight for downtown Dallas. At 6:06 p.m., NWS Dallas-Fort Worth issued a particularly dangerous situation tornado warning for Ellis and Dallas counties, causing sirens to blare once more. Businesses in Dallas tried to keep residents calm. They were already given a tornado warning earlier in the day. Travelers at the Dallas Love Airport were warned to stay away from windows. DFW International Airport was closed for about an hour, and people at the AMC movie complex at North Park Center were evacuated. The twister in Ellis County crossed East Highland Road and Westmoreland Road, before seemingly weakening as it moved north to the east of Oak Leaf, soon slamming into an elementary school, producing EF1 damage there. Damage remained minimal up until it passed near Craddock Drive and into Dallas County, producing EF2 to EF3 damage to homes near Mesa Drive and Tejas Drive at around 6:10 p.m. The destruction became scarce once again, hitting mobile homes along Brown Bear Trail before producing its last area of EF2 damage near the entrance of a subdivision near Southwool Road and north of Cascade Drive at 7:12 p.m., before shrinking and lifting south of East Parkerville Road at 7:13 p.m. The Ovilla EF3 tornado had peak winds of 160 miles per hour, traveled roughly 8.5 miles with a peak width of 125 yards over the course of 13 minutes, injuring 46 and causing at least $9.73 million in damages. After the tornado lifted, the primary supercell started to get cluttered as some of the other cells that formed earlier began to merge with it, causing the primary couplet to weaken as the supercell went into downtown Dallas. However, the southernmost cell in this complex, what was labeled as Supercell C earlier, was rapidly organizing. Thanks in part to the subtle interaction with the storms around it, Supercell C quickly became the dominant cell in the complex, and in less than half an hour, the strongest tornado of the event touched down in Dallas County. At 6:44 p.m., a twister touched down on East Trip Road north of Samuel Park North, and immediately started to produce minimal damage to homes in the subdivision to the north, rapidly widening as it moved through. At 6:45, the tornado entered the Homestead neighborhood, and began to produce EF2 damage to homes off of Old Mill Road and Shady Cove Drive. After moving over Eagles Crest Drive, the tornado traveled over mostly rural areas for the next 2 minutes, before reaching more populated areas once more. First hitting the Plantation Place RV Park, before producing EF2 damage to homes south of Christina Lane, then hitting homes near the intersection of Christina Lane and McGregor Drive. It was around this time when Ben finally caught sight of the tornado, and it became clear that it was a nightmare scenario that was seemingly unfolding right before his eyes.
Yeah, okay. So that school gets hit, and if I remember correctly, and you'll probably see it on radar, it was pretty obvious. I remember there being a CC, like you could tell it. Okay, yeah, that's probably a tornado. Um, and I wasn't at that point where I had gotten off in Greenville yet to go west. So I just stayed on 30 West, and it looked like that cell was going to kind of go into downtown Dallas, and which it did. And it was tornado warned all the way into downtown Dallas and north. So I'm coming in 30, and it's basically as I'm crossing the lake there by Rowlett. on 30 is when it's going into downtown Dallas. So my plan was to get on 635 and go west on the north side of Dallas around and try and see if I could make it to somewhere, like near the tollway or 75 north. But at some point, I realized that storm to its east is also, developing very well. And so I basically just wanted to get on a storm that was with the storm motion, which is why I chose that one. And then, I took that up to Highway 66, which the reason why I chose that road is just because it was the state highway. It was highlighted the most on my map. And so then I took that east, and you could see the tornado, and I'm guessing it was, in my video you can see the power flashes, and I'm guessing that was about the time it was crossing I-30. I haven't ever really gone over and like forensically figured out exactly which each power flash was, but then it kind of disappeared there for a while in to me, and I wasn't sure that it was still on the ground. But then obviously there's a lake there on the map, and I'm like, well, maybe it's over this lake, and yeah, sure enough, it was over the lake. What's the best way? I've seen some that look very big, but it more has to do with the LCLs and just the abundance of moisture, and really they're an EF2 or something like that. This didn't really look like that. This really looked quite violent even from the distance. Uh, just the holy shit going through my mind at the time is like I'm really witnessing this. This is really happening.
The Twister continued to produce EF2 damage mainly due to poor construction quality before it entered a neighborhood due west of Cypress Cove. At 6:48, just after crossing Bobtown Road and into a large subdivision south of I-30, it rapidly intensified and began producing EF4 damage, ripping homes apart down to just piles of debris. Next were houses near Oceanport Drive and Bayport Drive, where homes were reduced down to interior rooms. At around 6:50, the tornado hit a public storage facility, and then moved into the Embry Hills apartments, and the intersection of President George W. Bush Turnpike and I-30, reaching its peak strength with winds of 180 miles per hour, ripping buildings down to just piles of debris, and flinging cars off of the interstate. Many of those drivers were caught off guard. Storm chaser Connor McCrory was on the highway, confused as to where the tornado was. Before he knew it, he saw the tornado behind him, telling the driver to go faster as the Twister was quickly approaching. Connor escaped being hit by the tornado with 10 to 30 seconds to spare. Others were not as lucky. Petra Porras was driving near the intersection on a video call with her husband. Her husband was talking with her, then all of a sudden the connection died. Petra drove straight into the tornado's path, was thrown from the highway and killed. After snapping trees off of the highway and toppling light poles, the Twister moved over Lake Ray Hubbard for the next few minutes before crashing ashore at 6:53 near Rowlett, producing EF2 to 3 damage in the neighborhood near Fuqua Road, and continuing to produce significant damage to homes and neighborhoods between Garter Road and Bayview Drive. As it passed to the east of Lakeside Park North near Harbor Drive, the tornado started producing EF3 damage once again, tearing homes down to piles of debris. After crossing the county line, damage started to lighten a bit, still producing EF2 damage before it eventually moved onto the lake once again, shrinking and lifting over Lake Ray Hubbard at 7:03 p.m. The Garland-Rowlett EF4 tornado had peak winds of 180 miles per hour, traveled roughly 13 miles with a peak width of 550 yards over the course of 19 minutes, causing at least $26.8 million in damages, injuring 468 and killing 10. While the outbreak wasn't over, the worst of it thankfully was. The supercell that produced the Garland EF4 went on to produce an EF2 twister that moved through Copeville, Texas, killing 2, an EF1 outside of Farmersville, and an EF1 west of Blue Ridge that killed 1. In total, there were 13 tornadoes that touched down on the 26th. 8 EF0s, 2 EF1s, 1 EF2, 1 EF3, and 1 EF4. Damages done by the tornadoes stand at roughly $40 million, with 635 injuries and 13 deaths reported. For the DFW area, the threat quickly shifted to flash flooding, as torrential downpours flooded parts of the metro. But in general, with this weather system, all of the focus was on the winter side of things. From December 26th through the 30th, the storm complex brought heavy snowfall from Texas all the way to the northeastern United States. Flooding was also a problem, especially in the state of Missouri, where communities were inundated along the Merrimack River. But all the focus was in Dallas, where search and rescue operations quickly began. Ben Holcomb, while not part of EMS, did stop to evaluate the damage, and it was then when he encountered a woman named Marilyn who we took to the hospital.
So next thing I know, there's this lady in this, and she was trying to get to the hospital, is what I found out now, later. And this is Marilyn, and so she's trying to get to the hospital, and so her thought was to keep going on 66. So she had gotten hit by the tornado. I believe she was on the Del Rock Road, just south of 66, where she got hit. I think I still don't really understand or know exactly to this day. So she was an old lady, and her husband, he had died within the last couple of years at that point. It may have even been the last couple of months. I honestly don't remember, and I do have the audio to the entire interaction we had in the car, and I've never listened to it. Um, I don't know. Like I might listen to it at some point, but I just this is one of those things like I've kind of let be for all these years. Um, but she's alone. Like she's really alone in life, um and this is why I don't really want to talk about it or want to listen to it, is because um she was it must have been that she had lost her husband more recently, because she was kind of in, I don't want to say suicidal, but she didn't care if she died type thing, and she kind of expressed that to me, and I chalk some of it up to being um in shock. I mean, she was in shock. Uh but she had the wherewithal at least to grab, and she told me this is to this day kind of blows my mind, but she's in shock. She said she had grabbed a large sum of money, so she had thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash on her at the time, and so she gets hit by this tornado, and her car blows out all of her windows. She's freaking out, and she's covered in glass, like all over her face and stuff is all cut up and bleeding, and she's just freaking out. And the power lines are going, they keep trying to re-energize on both sides of the road, so it's just you know explosions all over the place. And so she's just absolutely freaking out, and looking back now, it's she was absolutely having a complete panic attack with shock, which is, in her shoes, I feel really bad for her that night. Um so I thought, like, well, we need to get her to an ambulance. And then I thought, well, even if we call an ambulance, it's going to take a lot longer to even get them to where we're standing than if I just take her in my car to the hospital. So that's what I did. I said, here, jump in my passenger seat. I had to, I, I don't remember if I just took the whole laptop mount and stuck it in the back, or if she sat there with the laptop mount. She might have sat there with the laptop mount. Um, and I was driving a Ford Taurus, so it was like basically like a squad car uh,
Right.
at the time. And so I just did what anybody, I think, in that situation would do. I think it was more instinct. Like, I didn't really think about it at the time. It was just logical steps of, well, we're not going to be able to get this lady help right away unless I take her to the hospital. So that's what I'm going to do. And so, um, everything's in my car. I just take off back down 66 westbound, and I had no idea where the closest hospital was or anything. I ended up got back to just back across by the turnpike, and I pulled into a parking lot, and I just started looking for the closest hospital. And I think I mentioned this to you the other day. It's actually the VA hospital now, but it was Baylor Scott and White at the time. And so I took her to there, the Baylor Scott and White in Garland, and I stuck around with her for a little while. Um, yeah, I don't know, probably 30 minutes or so. Like they got her back pretty quickly into the ER. Um, and I talked to the staff there for a few minutes, and I like I'd said in the text, I'd given her my card, but otherwise, I'm dropping this lady off with, I don't know, she's got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cash on her. I just dropped her off at the hospital. Um, and I asked the hospital about, so when she's done here, what happens? And they're like, well, we'll usually get her a cab, or we'll help her find her way back. And I'm like, all right, then I'm good here.
Search and rescue efforts began almost immediately after the Twisters had left, but only to a limited extent. Some of the responders gathered in a Walmart parking lot to discuss what to do. Others got out of their cars near the intersection of the George Bush Turnpike and I-30 to render first aid to victims. The complete darkness and persistent rain made damage observations close to impossible. Many would have to wait until the morning when daylight came. Despite the rain still being present in the morning, the devastation was obvious no matter where you were in the tornado's path. Visible damage from the Ovilla EF3 began off of Palmer Road, where a house had some shingles missing that were covered up quickly with blue tarp. Further up the road were some large limbs that were broken off of some trees. And then off of Daniel Road laid a mobile home upside down. Trees with shallow roots were uprooted from the ground too, as debris from the mobile homes was scattered across the ground. Damage started to get more intense off of Walker Court South. This is what was left of one home. The debris from the house was in the yard. Some of the walls were toppled onto each other, and the cabling and electrical wiring of some rooms were left dangling down onto the ground. The two homes up the road had nothing left of the roofs, with the outer walls partially collapsing for one. A house off of Faith Lane was pretty much split into two segments. One home off of Reese Court had its roof ripped off, while right across the street was an outbuilding that was completely obliterated, with barely anything left of the structure. Off of Megan Lane, house after house suffered extensive damage. Usually the complete absence of a roof with some second-story walls still intact. But the debris field was pretty extensive with insulation littering the field nearby. Going north into homes off of Glenlock Drive, Etta Court, and Rex Court, the damage was similar to that of homes off of Megan Lane. Roof failures were abundant. Off of Glenlock Drive laid a home that suffered a partial second-story collapse because the winds blew out the garage. Off of Etta Court, a Lincoln Aviator was left on its roof and covered with mud. Looking at it, you could tell it was totaled. Two homes off of Rex Court were left in pretty bad shape, with the exterior walls of both houses collapsed on the ground. Off Billingsley Drive, a home was wiped off of its foundation with only a small room on the inside being left intact according to the damage description. Also there, NWS Dallas Fort Worth notes that Tim Marshall said the building was built up to code, and possibly an EF4 DI, but it was rated EF3 160 miles per hour. Off of Ovilla Road was the elementary school, where three separate walls of the school toppled onto the earth, with one likely due to wind channeling through a previously collapsed wall. Two of them were nailed into the foundation, giving these damage markers an EF1 rating. Off of Trishelle Lane laid a home missing its top story. The debris from the house, including part of the AC system, laying down in the yard. Extensive damage was also found to homes on Mesa Drive, including in one case where a home was almost entirely wiped out. Fields of debris laid out off of Tejas Drive, and yet another home was left with just some interior walls left. Mobile homes off of Brown Bear Trail were separated from their undercarriages, tumbled and rolled onto their side, or left barely recognizable. The last areas of significant damage were noted off of Mockingbird Lane and Cascade Drive, where roofs were torn apart and garages failed, causing the upper stories of homes off of Cascade Drive to be torn apart. Just like with the Ovilla EF3, Damage from the Garland-Rowlett EF4 started off with simple shingle and roof damage to homes off of Suntide Drive, but it quickly got worse as it passed to the east of Samuel New Hope Park, starting with severe roof damage to a house off of Creekwood Drive. Part of the top story of a home off of Old Mill Road was torn away in the wind, and most homes in the neighborhood suffered from moderate to severe roof damage, up until a home off of Shady Cove Drive where the second-story exterior walls were ripped out. Damage remained minimal for a while thanks to the rural terrain the tornado crossed over, up until it hit the Plantation RV trailer park. RVs were tossed around like toys. Some were left intact, others were completely destroyed. Off Christina Lane, damage intensified once more, where one house was mostly destroyed, with only a portion of the home still standing. The walls of one house off of McGregor Drive was gone entirely because there was no anchoring to the foundation. Extensive damage only continued as it got closer to I-30, house after house with exterior walls just missing. Off of Crest Point Lane, a home was swept off of its foundation, left as nothing more than a pile of debris. Homes were left unrecognizable with just the lower floors still standing, or left with a truck inside of a home in one case. The Embry Hills apartments, utterly devastated. The top stories of multiple buildings in the complex were destroyed, and other buildings nearby were swept off of their foundations. Meanwhile, cars littered the region, tossed and thrown off of I-30 and the President George Bush Turnpike. The destruction didn't stop after it moved over the lake and made its way back on land just outside of Rowlett. One house off of La Costa Drive was reduced to just a pile of rubble. Homes off of Lagoon Drive were left barely recognizable, only left with some interior walls. EF3 damage began once again off of Harbor Drive, with a home where all the walls had collapsed. The devastation from the twister was obvious from Meritor Drive. A home only had some small interior rooms left, but there was an obvious debris field that littered the area. The last region of EF3 damage was noted off of Lake Bend Drive, where a home was blasted into a field of debris. But the damage left behind was only part of the aftermath. The other side were the stories of survival. Kevin Taylor was at his church in Glen Heights when he noticed the church was starting to collapse. He ran down a hallway to try and take cover, only for the building to fall on top of him. He only survived by the grace of God, he said to reporters. Tina Kong and her family in Garland were watching a movie when the warnings went out. They didn't think much of it until a power flash illuminated the room. The family huddled around a couch when the tornado began to unleash its rage on the home. Following the twister, local judge Clay Jenkins declared the city of Rowlett a disaster area within minutes of seeing the damage himself, with a 24-hour curfew put in place in the affected areas, with only residents and EMS personnel allowed in to limit the threat of looting. In the days after, Texas Governor Greg Abbott declared a state of emergency for Dallas County alongside 3 others. Aid quickly poured in from inside and outside of the community into places such as a local elementary school, the Connection Community Church, and the First Baptist Church. Charities such as the Red Cross, Salvation Army, and Operation Barbecue Relief came to the region to give support to victims and first responders. Businesses such as American Airlines pledged $100,000 to a Texas chapter of the American Red Cross to help those affected by the twisters. As time progressed, things would slowly start to get better for those in the region. It wasn't pleasant, but conditions would slowly start to improve for most. So 10 years later, how is the area doing today? On December 26, 2015, those in the Dallas-Fort Worth area were joyfully experiencing the day after Christmas, spending time with family, enjoying their gifts, and returning unwanted gifts to retail workers. For many, that was the game plan that Saturday, but Mother Nature had other ideas. By the night's end, 13 tornadoes would touch down in north-central Texas and Oklahoma. Of those, 7 would directly impact counties in the Dallas metro, including an EF3 twister that tore through multiple neighborhoods in Ellis and Dallas counties, impacting the communities of Ovilla, Oakleaf, Glen Heights, and DeSoto. An EF4 twister that hit portions of Garland and Rowlett, Texas with peak winds of 180 miles per hour. The first violent tornado to hit Dallas County since 1926. and an EF2 twister that struck Cokeville, Texas. This year marks 10 years since the disaster, so what's happened since then? In January 2016, a concert was held to benefit victims featuring artist Sarah Beth, with all contributions raised going to the Salvation Army to aid tornado victims in Garland. Other companies, such as Stream, NBC5, Garland Parks, amongst others, contributed to the fund. In November that year, Jim Holt started the Ho 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 Holiday Relief Facebook page to organize drop-offs and donations for victims. Steve Walker started Rowlett Strong, raising funds to rebuild the areas hit the hardest, with focus shifting to helping the first responders who helped during the search and rescue efforts. Within 2 years of the tornado occurring, only 22 buildings had not been rebuilt, and local churches such as the Oasis Church pledged to rebuild. If you look at the neighborhoods that were hit the hardest from the twisters, they've rebuilt. Visually speaking, it's only gotten larger. As Ben Holcomb put it, you can barely tell a tornado was there.
So I have been back to the area since 2015. I want to say it was either 22, 23, or 24. So within the last 4 years or so. I stayed, I think, in Plano. I don't remember why I was up there. It doesn't matter. Basically, I was I think it was Plano East. I stayed in a hotel up there, and I had some time to burn. Like, I probably went to a concert or something, and that was the cheap hotel. And I woke up the next day, and like, I didn't have to be back to Oklahoma very fast, but it was one of those, like, yeah, I'm gonna start heading home. And so I did actually drive out through there, just to see, and you can't tell there was a tornado there. Like, it took me a minute. I actually had to kind of go look at stuff to make sure. Okay, yeah, that is actually where the tornado was. And my guess is if I went and inspected everything, I could find tornado damage, and obviously a lack of trees, but it's not obvious. Like, so what are we,
It keeps
7 to 8 years later? Like, yeah, it was nothing that stuck out to me that hey, there's a big tornado here.
Yeah.
Like in Moore, you can tell where the 2013. I don't care what anybody tells you. You can tell where the 2013 was. All the houses look newer. There's no trees in that path. Like, you can tell where it was, and this wasn't the case there. So
the DFW area as a whole continues to get larger and larger each year, which has its pros and cons. There was apparently a nightmare regarding home insurance that followed in the neighborhoods affected, according to Jeff, who provided me with some photos of the damage. Now, as for how the region itself has grown, as in the DFW metro as a whole, I had a friend of mine who lives in the area give a very brief description as to what has happened since population-wise.
Hello, my name is Jackson, also known as DFW Storm Chasing, and today I'm here to talk about the growth of the DFW metro. The population of the DFW metro has grown significantly, growing from 5.2 million people in 2000 to 8.5 million people in 2025. The metro gains an average of 180,000 people a year, meaning that the metro will likely surpass 10 million people in the next 10 years. Some of the areas on the eastern side of the metro have grown significantly faster than others, such as Rowlett, which has grown from 44,000 people to 68,000 people since 2000, and the city of Rockwall, which has grown from 18,000 to 53,000 people in the past 25 years. With all this new population growth comes a lot of issues, such as traffic. The traffic in the DFW metro has gotten significantly worse, and I've had to witness it firsthand. With excess traffic comes bad drivers, something that I've had to witness firsthand. Like, seriously, look at some of these clips. Like, this is insanity. I've seen people go the wrong way. People outrun the cops. People try and, what are they doing? What is that? Why are you doing that? My dad has had his truck totaled because someone wasn't paying attention. I have been hit multiple times. My truck has been through multiple battle scars, essentially, because of these stupid people on the roads that I can't deal with anymore. Come on!
Traffic complaints aside, the region keeps growing. And since then, their encounters with tornadoes hasn't stopped either. In October 2019, an EF3 tornado tore through northern Dallas and into parts of Richardson, causing $1.6 billion in damages, becoming the second costliest tornado in Texas state history. Then there was that probably was a tornado that wasn't a tornado that happened this year. Regardless, this area of Texas continues to grow. The Garland-Rowlett EF4 isn't forgotten about per se, but its notoriety is significantly less than that of the Rochelle-Fairdale tornado that happened back in April. The twister also happening immediately after the Holly Springs EF4 in Mississippi didn't help much either. From the news side of things, the death toll and damage costs were low given where it happened. As stupid as that sounds, it's just how national news works. But I'd also argue it's because of what it wasn't. If this supercell was 10 miles to the west, or if the first supercell in the complex was able to avoid being in a complex blobby mess as it went into downtown Dallas, assuming the intensity of the twister would stay relatively the same, you would have seen the first violent or intense tornado to go through the downtown area of a major city in quite some time. Despite all of that rambling about why it may not be seen as significant as other twisters from that year, the tornadoes from December 26, 2015 will not be forgotten by residents 10 years later, as they come back to remember the pain and the trauma, but also the support they received by their fellow neighbors and strangers alike. And it's a tornado outbreak that I will not forget anytime soon. So, more people than usual did help me with this, so this may be a tad longer. So for this video specifically, special thanks to my script proofreaders, those being Foxtrot and Gamma Ray, Convective Chronicles and Destroyer for helping me with a synopsis alongside my proofreaders, Kelton Henderson for the image of the Cordova supercell for illustrative purposes, DFW Storm Chaser for the bit about the population and traffic in DFW, Aster for the tornado icons I use in my animations, and Ben Holcomb for agreeing to an interview, and letting me use his footage in the video and some of the photos for the thumbnail. I nearly forgot to give credit, but I want to give thanks to Jeff too for providing me with some images of the damage. I wasn't able to use most of it, but still, thank you. As always, special thanks to my channel artist Celtic White for the design of my OC, Amberry for the VTuber model, Zinel, Crackalick, and Cyanide Blue for letting me use their music whenever I use it, and everyone for watching. It means a lot. Additional thanks to those who are subscribed to the channel Patreon or are a YouTube member. Those being Alan Boomer, Montpelier, Phoenix, and Queen Hyena at the Alvi's Army tier, Autostradamus, Michelle, Tanner, Techno Idioto, and Worm Off the String at the Alf Jr. tier, Bipolar Batty, Brian Hawley, Call of the Void, Dante DMC, David R, Esri, Foscrew, Foxtrot, Fry JC, Hannah Stormer, James Sullivan, Kara Kelly, King Shisa, Liz Swaff, Means Beans Machines, Rama, Tirani Rielta, and Van Granny at the Ulf Mini tier, and everyone listed at the Ulf Supporter tier. It means a lot. If you wish to support the channel financially, consider joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Just to provide a little insight, I do plan on making the Patreon and member stuff more interesting as we go into next year, but I'll make a video on that when stuff gets rolling. Anyways, that's all I got. If you liked the video, consider subscribing to the channel, giving the video a like, commenting your thoughts, sharing it around, all that jazz. Also consider following me on Twitter and Twitch, and even joining my Discord server. All of that is in the description. That being said, I'm Alferia, you all stay safe, and I'll see you all soon.